Welcome, everyone. Here's a mini lesson on nonfiction. Today, we are going to look at the elements of nonfiction, how to come up with a controlling idea, and summarizing. So, first things first, we take a look at our title. Now, we know this is nonfiction because this is a nonfiction mini lesson, but look at the title and see what elements tell you, or what language, what words tell you this is probably nonfiction. So, an engineer, that's a real job. Propose means to ask or question or throw out an idea about something. So, engineers are coming up with an idea for a new plan to keep Venice afloat. Now, even if I don't know what Venice is, if I've not heard of it, I do know that Venice is a noun, probably a thing or a place, and afloat means to stay floating. So engineers are positioning or asking or coming up with a new plan to keep this thing called Venice afloat. Now, I do know what Venice is, and I'm going to use this picture as context and give me some information about Venice. So one of the things that I notice about is a picture and a caption. When there is a picture and a caption, what we're thinking is the author of this article wants to give me more information. And the words paired with the image are going to tell me more about what's happening than just the words alone. So I see this picture, and it is my job as the reader of this passage to investigate this picture at least a little bit. So here's what I see. I see buildings. I see water. I see boats. I see, if I zoom in even more, I see this water, and this water is going all the way up to the edge of these buildings. That's very interesting. For some of you, this might not be something you've seen before, which is fine. It is our job to investigate the pictures and see what this information is telling us. Now it's time to the caption. Venice is a city not on an island, but the city is the island. Waterways and canals exist instead of roads, and every structure is supported by stilts. So, if I'm going to paraphrase this, what I now know about Venice is this water right here acts like a road. So, these boats are like cars in this city. And these buildings, where the water comes right up to, are on stilts that are holding them up. So I see this really, really big rounded top building, other small buildings, but I see 3-story buildings, 2-story buildings, and I'm starting to maybe have a better idea of what it's like in this city. So I'm going to zoom back out, and that is one of my fiction elements, pictures with captions. Before I start to read, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit more, and I notice subheadings. I notice another subheading. When I see these subheadings, what I know that the author and the text are telling me is that this text is broken up into sections. They're chunking these sections of the text to help me understand it better. So I've got this big idea. Engineers are coming up with a plan to keep the city of Venice floating. And then I go to my subheadings and I think, oh, fighting water with water. I'm not 100% sure what that means. It sounds kind of crazy, but maybe they're trying to keep the city afloat with water, because that's what this whole article is about. The sinking feeling. Maybe there's something going wrong with the city as it's sinking. They're trying to keep it afloat. Maybe it's sinking. I see in my second page, stemming the tide. Stemming might be a new word to me, so I'm going to look it up. Do a quick right click, define stemming. To stem is originate in or be caused by. I'm not sure if that starts it, or sorry, if that makes sense. Remove the stems from, make headway against, make headway against the tide. Well, I know the tide is the water when it comes in and out of somewhere. So making headway against something, it sounds almost like they're trying to prevent it when I pair it with this picture. So maybe that picture tells me that they're trying to keep the water out of the city somehow. It looks like the water's hitting this little yellow flap or something that may or may not move. It's hard to tell. We'll learn more information when we read. But the important thing to know is that these elements of nonfiction, tell us about the article and give us information about what we're getting ready to read. So that's our quick mini lesson in thinking about the elements. Now let's start reading the text. Venice is a city well known throughout the world for the canals that carve through the city. The winding waterways provide a breathtaking backdrop for Venice's amazing architecture. But the water that makes Venice famous is also its curse. During some high tides the Adriatic Sea laps dangerously at the city, flooding historic landmarks such as St. Mark's Square. Built on a series of islands, Venice is slowly sinking into the sea, dropping about 1.57 inches a year. By the end of the century, scientists warned the city could be completely submerged. Now, engineers have come up with a new plan to keep the famous city afloat, adding more water. So, I've read this first opening paragraph. The next thing I want to do is think about a couple things. One, the meaning. Two, did I know all the words that I needed to? And those two are very connected. So, if I'm thinking about what I read, I know that Venice, this city in the picture, is sinking. It's a very old city, but the thing that makes it so great and so interesting is also causing its problems. So it is sinking, but we know that engineers are coming up with a plan to stop it from sinking and maybe fix it. I'm going to go over here to this little chart right here. The things I need to know about nonfiction are who the article is about, who the story is about, who the passage is about. Who doesn't necessarily mean a person. It can mean anything that's a noun, but really it's talking about the subject or the topic. So my topic is Venice. So the city, what is happening to the city? This is all from these first 4 paragraphs. The city is sinking. The city is sinking. That's not great. But what isn't just that it's sinking, it's that it's sinking and engineers and scientists are coming up with a plan to keep it afloat. Fighting water with water. Water may seem like the last thing Venice needs, but Giuseppe Gambolati says the plan could be instrumental in stopping the city from drowning. Gambolati, a professor at the University of Padua, is leading the project. In fact, Gambolati says there's a plan. The plan could actually raise Venice by 1 foot, the same amount the city has dropped in the last 300 years. Gambolati and his team of engineers and geology experts hope to pump seawater more than 2,000 feet underneath the city. The seawater would expand the sand under Venice, eventually lifting the top layer of the soil, they say. If the test project proves successful, we will see an immediate benefit, even though it will be gradual. Gambolati told the Associated Press he estimates the complete elevation will be achieved in around 10 years. Okay, now that's how they planned to lift the city with water. I got to make sure I understand it. They want to pump seawater more than 2,000 feet underneath the city. So I know that there's the problem of the sinking city, and here's a solution. They want and hope that pumping the seawater will slowly raise the city. And I do have this little reminder over here to use the caption to help us better understand what we are thinking about, what we're reading about. The picture and the caption obviously go together, and the caption information plus the information about the passage give us the purpose of the caption. So for those of us who didn't know what Venice was before, our Venice tells us about, or sorry, the caption tells us about Venice as a city, and it tells us that every structure is supported by stilts. That's really important because based on what we know about the city from the article is that it's sinking. So the engineers have to figure out a way to keep the buildings supported and lift them up because the water level is rising also. So the sinking city needs to be reversed. A sinking feeling. Some people think Gambolotti's idea doesn't hold water. Michelle Jimilowski, an engineering professor at Turin Polytechnic University, says that Gambolotti's plan is unrealistic. We are really in an area of science fiction, he says about the plan. He warns that it would cost millions of dollars and might raise the city only a few inches. Other people worry that seawater could cause parts of the city to rise higher than other areas, damaging priceless buildings. Venice is in a delicate situation, says Giovanni Mazzacurati, the president of the New Venice Consortium. We should parts of the city be elevated in a different way, this would cause the city to crumble. Despite the risks, everyone agrees that saving the sinking city is imperative. If we let Venice fall into the sea, the world would lose a tremendous part of history, says Melissa Kahn of the Save Venice, a group dedicated to helping preserve the city. Now, again, this picture helps us better see and understand, along with the caption, really what the problems are and how possibly dangerous and dramatic the problems are, too. They're talking in this paragraph, a sinking feeling, about losing the city if they don't raise it correctly. If different buildings are raised faster or slower than other buildings, or higher or lower than other buildings, it is possible that the buildings would just collapse and fall on each other, which would cause the city to crumble and fade away. So we can start to build our understanding now of who, what, how is it happening. So we know how the city is sinking. How is the raising of the city happening? Well, they're trying to inject water below the city to raise it. And we get a bit more of the what down here too. So the what and the how are vital for us understanding the full picture of a nonfiction article. How is like our supporting details. If we combine our what and our who, we kind of have a controlling idea. For example, who is the city of Venice? What is happening? The city of Venice is sinking, but engineers are trying to prevent it from sinking and raise it. How is that happening? We have fighting water with water. That's those supporting details for how they're trying to lift the city. And we have a counter argument for how fighting water with water may not work, or just how precarious and dangerous their situation is. Why is it happening? We also get that here too. They don't want to lose this city that we can pick up on. It says 300 years for how long it's been sinking. If you know anything about the city, Venice has been around for close to 1,000 years. It's a very, very old city. So they're trying to preserve this part of Italian history and culture. Next, stemming the tide. Seawater isn't Venice's only hope. City officials are already hard at work on another rescue plan, building giant floodgates to protect the city. Now, here's a word that we don't see often, but it's a compound word. Flood, we know what a flood is, and gate. So a floodgate protects a flood. It pops up like a gate and prevents flood water from coming in. That must be what this picture is. The plan is called Mos, after Moses, the biblical figure who called upon God to part the Red Sea. It calls for hinged gates to be built in the lagoon just off of Venice. The hollow steel panels would lie flat on the lagoon during normal weather. They would swing up to form a protective wall during dangerously high tides. Officials expect the $5.2 billion project to be completed in a few years. Venice is well known throughout the world for the canals that carve through the city. The winding waterways provide breathtaking backdrops, and that also makes Venice its curse. This is actually an extra paragraph. We're going to go ahead and delete that. So we're going to start to fill this in. First, my topic and my subject, like we talked about, the who is Venice. What is happening? Venice is sinking, but engineers are trying to keep it afloat. I'm going to combine this for my controlling idea. Venice is sinking, but let's just say what we wrote. Engineers are devising plans to keep water out and raise the city. So I now have a controlling idea because I combined Venice, which is my who, and what's happening, obviously, my what. And it comes out as a very nice controlling idea. Now, we talked about how we're coming up with our controlling idea. It's that simple. Summarizing also has its benefits because we can use paraphrasing our subheadings to help us figure out a summary. So we have our controlling idea. I'm going to copy and paste the controlling idea into the summary section. I actually might make that a little bit bigger. So we have a little more space. And I'm going to go back to my subheadings and I'm going to copy and paste them here. Got one subheading. Got my second subheadings, a sinking feeling. Got my third subheading. And now I'm going to paraphrase them to help me better summarize the text. So, fighting water with water. Well, I remember that Gambiolati, an engineer, wants to inject water 2,000 feet below the city to lift the sand, the stilts of the buildings rest on. This would raise the city over time. And there's my paraphrase. A sinking feeling. Some people are unsure about the feasibility of this plan. They are worried it will not raise the city enough and that it will raise the buildings unevenly, which will make them fall over. Stemming the tide. The Mose project is a floodgate that prevents water from entering the city during bad weather. All right, so if I want a good summary, I'm going to take my paraphrasing of each subheading, right, and subsection, and I'm going to add it to my summary or to my controlling idea. So, Venice is sinking, but the engineers are devising a plan to keep water out and raise a city. The plan to raise the city involves injecting water under the sand that the buildings rest on. However, there are skeptics or people that don't believe it'll work that are unsure that this plan will safely raise the city. In the meantime, the floodgates prevent too much water from causing more flooding and problems in the city. All right, I now have a 4-sentence summary based on my controlling idea and a paraphrase of each of the subheadings and the subsections. If I can do that, I have a very, very comprehensive summary of my nonfiction text. If I know my who or the subject of the text, topic of the text, what's happening to that topic, how it's happening, the evidence of what's happening to that topic, and why it's happening, I can make sure that I know my controlling idea, all the different parts of the text, as well as provide a good summary. And that's a nonfiction text.